All right, starting Excel 3, we're going to get into more in-depth formulas and functions. So let's do this with me. Open up this document and let's take a look at this first sheet. And notice what I have are animals. I have a yes or no question. I have a food designation that goes with a chart over here. And I have a weight. And then we have some criteria over here. So what we're doing is we're going to say if it weighs 500 or more, it's super scary. Otherwise, it's fine. So that means in this box, I want to see the word super scary or I want to see the word fine. And to do that, we use what's called an if function. Now, I find this easier to do by pressing this FX button for insert function and using the buttons. So here we go. I'm going to click it and locate the if function. If yours doesn't show up, it is a logical function. So if you go in here to logical, you should be able to locate an if function. You're going to press OK and you're going to have this box here. And we're just going to analyze it. Notice what it's doing is it's creating the function. It's putting in the equal sign and the function name and the parentheses. So we actually don't have to type all of that. So what you're going to do is you look at basically the line you're on. So we're looking at the camel. And what is the rule here? We're saying if the camel weighs 500 or more, then we want it to say super scary. So the logical test is we're looking at the number, right? We're looking at the 500. So we're going to say if this box, and it says 500 or more. So that means is greater than or equal to. So you put both of them, and then we say 500. Okay, now notice here it says true. And the reason it says true is because it's looking at this box, and it's looking at the if function, and it's saying it does. It is greater than or equal to 500, so it's true. So then here it says value if true. What do we want in this box if it's true? Well, then it's super scary. So I'm going to type in the word super scary. Then I'm going to click down here in the false. And notice because it's text, it should put quotation marks around it. If it's false, like it's not 500 or more, then it's just going to be fine. We're not afraid of it. So we'll type in fine in here. And then when you hit OK, notice what it's done. If we look up here, we have the logical test. So we can see in here, this one is super scary. Now this little guy here in the corner, this little notch, that's called a fill handle. So to copy this down, because this is just looking at camel, to tell it, hey, I need this one to look at platypus, and this one to look at elephant, and this one to look at beaver. To essentially copy it down, we use the fill handle. Don't double click, you're just clicked on it once. Okay? Then grab a hold of the notch and pull down. And that copies it in there. And if you want to double check your formula, you're going to double click in the box. So I'm going to double click on E9. And here it is. So it says if D9, which is this number that's lit up, the elk, is greater than or equal to 500, super scary. And if not, this is the false, fine. So notice in here we have this part, which is called the logical test. And the logical test is always going to be either greater than, equal, greater than or equal, or just equal, something like that. Okay? It could be used for text, but that would only be equal. So I could be like, if it equals yes, then I could have D9 equals, and then yes would be in quotation marks. Okay? Now, just hit enter to put your function or formula in so that you get your answer. Okay, so there is that one. Now, we have the same one. I want you to see if you can figure this one out. I want you to pause, right? I want you to try to think it through by looking back at this one. How would we do this one? We're looking at, of course, first, the camel. If it's dark, it gets a white crown. If not, it gets a silver crown. So we're looking at this, and we're looking at the yes or no of this, right? We're going to say if it's yes, this thing, which would be true, and if not, this thing, which would be the false. Or you could say if it's no, you have to decide which one you want to go with when you have two choices. So pause me. And then come back, and I want you to try this one out. Okay, I hope you actually paused and tried it, but here we go this time. So I'm going to go back into my Insert Function dialog box and choose an if. And what's the logical test here? We're saying if this box equals, and then what? You can pick which one. It's going to either equal yes or it's going to equal no. But let's say if it equals yes. That's what I'm going to put. And this is text, so this gets quotation marks. So this one does not equal yes. It says it's false because this one equals no. Okay? So since I'm doing it this way, if it's yes, and this one is, if it's dark, it gets a white crown. If it's not, it gets silver crown. So that means dark would be yes, and not dark would be no. So if it's true, if it's yes, if it is dark, it gets a white crown, right? And if not, it gets a silver crown. Now, to be honest, it wouldn't even have to be the word no. It could be anything, right? So I'm going to hit OK. There we go. This one should say silver crown. Now, yours could be backwards. You might have said if B5 equals no, and if that's the case, yours would be flip-flopped. But your answers should be the same. Again, grab a hold of the fill handle and pull down. And let's just think. If it's dark, it gets a white crown. Do all my ones that say yes have a white crown? Yes, they do. So that one is correct. Okay. Now, one more thing to try here is to look at this food chart. And this time, we have multiple options. So it's not just a yes or a no. We have multiple options. To do this, we use something called a lookup. And a lookup can be either a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP. And a VLOOKUP means vertical, which means up and down, which is like columns, because these are columns, J and K. So this one is going to be a VLOOKUP. I'm going to click my button again. And if you can't find it, you can always just type it up here and hit enter. There it is. And I'm going to hit OK. Now, this one's kind of confusing because it's got a lot of boxes. So let's break this down. The lookup value just simply means, what am I looking at? So remember, all of these we're just looking at the camel, right, on the first row. So what am I looking up for the camel to decide what food it gets? I'm looking up this box right here, C5. So I'm looking up C5. Table array means where is the information telling me what's A, what's B, what's C. And that's this over here. Okay, and it says here it looks for a value in the leftmost column. That means it's going to look for something here. And then returns a value in the same row from the column you specify. And it says your table has to be in alphabetical order. And it is. ABC is alphabetical, right? So I need this is my table. Now, here's the problem with this. When we copy a fill handle down, it updates these numbers or these rows. That's going to be a problem here because I need platypus, elephant, beaver, and elk to also look in these columns. So this has to be what's called an absolute reference, which means the table array needs to always point to these. Now let me show you what it does if you do it wrong. I'm going to leave this in here, but this would be wrong, okay? Column index number. When you click in these, it tells you what they are. Column index number is the column number in the table array. This is the table array. This is column 1. This is column 2. Ignore all this stuff. Column 1, column 2. It's the column in which the matching value from which the matching value should be returned. So that means after I look here at the ABC, where's the answer? So the column index number is, where is the answer? And in this case, it's 2. It's never going to be 1 because we're always looking up the first column. So it's 2. So you put a number 2 here. I know that seems weird, but that's the case. Okay, now notice here, it's looking at this one. It's looking at camel. Camel, it's looking in the chart, and it says C. So it looked in my chart, and it found it, and it said C, answer 2, is going to equal something else gross. And that's actually correct, right? We can kind of walk through this from a logical standpoint. All right, the last thing here is range lookup. You can usually leave this off. What this does is if there is an approximate match. So like say I had a 10, 20, 30 on here and something was 15. Well, then it doesn't match one of these. Okay? So if you leave it blank, it's like setting this to true. And if you put false in it, it says it has to be an exact match. So it kind of depends on whether your book tells you you have to put this or not, to be honest. But if it has to find an exact match, then we would put the word false in there. Now I'm going to hit OK, and it says something else gross, and then I'm going to grab a hold of this little guy and pull down. Now, see where the problem is? So let's double click this formula and look at it. So what's happening is it's looking at this table on the first one, right? And I'm going to hit enter. But when we get down to this one and double click it, look what it did. It's looking lower, right? So what happened is when we copied the formula down, it tried to help us by increasing each of these numbers, but that's not what we needed. Okay, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to delete these. I'm going to go back to this one. I'm just going to hit the FX button again to open it back up where you can see the little box. Okay, so what do we need to do? That's the question. This needs to always point to this. Okay, and to do that, you're going to press on your keyboard F4. That's on the very top row of your keyboard, F4. And I want you to see what it did here. It put dollar signs everywhere. Dollar signs, in this case, don't indicate money. They indicate absolute. Kind of think like it's a push pin. We're putting a push pin in J8 and a push pin in K10, and we're saying, hey, you got to leave these things here. Even when I copy paste, these are push pinned into here. So think of your dollar signs kind of like push pins. They absolutely always must remain in that spot. So they're absolute references. Okay? That's again F4 on your keyboard. You might want to write that down. Okay, I'm going to hit OK, and now grab my handle, and now it should work. The A's are puppy chow, the B's are fish stuff, the C is something else gross. Okay. Now it is your turn. You're going to click over here to the if sheet, and I want you to use the notes, and I want you to attempt to do the same thing over here in this column. So baby A, remember when you do the first line, we're just looking at baby A, right? So here, it's the color of the hat. Boys get blue, girls get pink. So you're going to have to be evaluating this. So you're going to use your if, and if it's M, it's something. And if it's not, it's going to be something else. For the diaper size, this one you're going to have if something weighs 10 pounds or more, it needs a large diaper, otherwise it's a small. So this one we're going to have to say 10 pounds or more. That's greater than or equal. Okay. And then for prizes, this is going to be one where we're going to tell it to use the table in the VLOOKUP. So here's that table, and this is where we have to F4 because we have to make sure that we're doing the proper one. So use your FX button to go locate these. You're going to use if for these first two and a VLOOKUP for this third one. Good luck.